Welcome to Podjunction, where business meets podcasting. Whether you're on a morning jog, driving to work, whipping up a meal, or just taking a moment for yourself, our weekly bite-sized episodes promise fresh insights from successful podcasters who have cracked the code of using podcasts to grow their business. So whether you're a podcasting newbie or seasoned podcaster, grab your notebooks and get ready.
Wow, hello. Welcome to Podjunction. My name is Matt Edmondson, and beside me is the wonderful, the amazing, the debonair, the fashion statement, which is Sadaf Bainon. How are we doing?
We're good. We're really good. Thank you, Matt.
In the one that we did pre this, where we kind of messed up, so we just recorded it again. We might have said that Sadaf was bossy.
Slightly bossy, let me add.
And
I approved of slightly bossy, not bossy.
Yeah. Okay, not There we go, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here first. And I think you've just proven my point. Which is a beautiful thing. So, yeah, welcome to the show. We talk about how to use podcasting to grow your business. We're just interested in that as an idea, as a concept, as a strategy. And so that's what we talk about on the show, as well as how bossy Sadaf actually is. Yes, we do. How are we doing?
We're good.
Are you sure?
Good. Yes, very good. Thank you.
It's very good. Yes, no, it's good to hear. Actually, at the time of recording, we are set for a heat wave this weekend. Did you know this?
Yes, I do know this in theory.
Do you believe it?
No.
Why is that?
I think it'll stay dry. I think the sun might come out.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to get hot.
Okay. We'll find out.
It's Liverpool.
It
it's
is
England.
It's England.
It's the UK.
Yeah. Also known as the cold wetlands.
Yes.
So yes, no, it'll be good if we did get that hot weather. So wherever you are, hopefully you're going to have some good weather this weekend. What are you going to be doing if the weather is good? Just out of curiosity. That much?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to be replacing a roof, so I'm really hoping for good weather, which would be nice. But yes. Anyway, we digress. Shall we get into it? So we have Denis Gianoutsos on the show today, a man from the land down under, a legend, Denis, the Leadership is Changing podcast. What are we talking about with Denis? We
are talking about the benefits of podcasting.
The benefits
and
of
I won't
podcast.
say more than that.
No, let Denis do it.
Yeah.
So the way it's going to work, we are going to play a clip from Denis, from our conversation with Denis, a clip from the interview. And then Sadaf and I will be back after this to chat about it and what it all means. So grab your notebooks, grab your pens. Here is Denis. What I am curious about is how you've bridged the bridge between your podcast and your business. How does your podcast then tie into your business? And what was the thinking behind starting that?
Yes, I think it was more, I was thinking about a title, and I was thinking about what was going on in the world, and this is pre-pandemic. And so what we were starting to see is that things were getting faster and faster, and they have been over several years, but leadership is starting to change in a certain way. And so that topic came up. And the reason I wanted to interview people and start the podcast was to really get out there an understanding for people, to help them understand that they might be struggling in what they do on a daily basis, but you know what? There are other people as well, but this is what they've done to get around it and resolve it. And so that was one thing. The second thing is I see the podcast really as a really strong way for me to, A, raise the credibility, B would be exposure, and then C would be helping people understand Denis, get to know, like, and trust him, right? And understand who he is. And so it's more around the branding side. I've been up against others for pieces of work, and I've won that work because of the podcast.
Oh, wow.
So people have said to me, we listen to your podcast, we understand what you can do, we're loving what you're saying, and we're sharing. We want to go with you. So that's really helped as well. So I think the big thing for me is that it's actually built the credibility, but also brought business in for me as a result of the podcast.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, you talk about credibility, and we've had a few guests talk about that on the show. You know, you write a book, or the easy thing, I'd say easy. To me, it was easier to start a podcast and to try and write a book, if that makes sense. And so I get the credibility aspect of it there. I love what you say about it's a great way for people to get to know Denis, because they do hear your voice a lot, don't they? The listeners, they get used to your mannerisms and how you talk. And one of the things that's always intrigued me, and I don't know if you get messages like this, Denis, but one of the things that's always intrigued me from the listeners to the podcast that I'm on is that when they contact you, it's like they know you. There's something about the way they're talking to you, like you've met them, you know them, and it's really, really fascinating. Do you find that?
Yeah, I do, and it's a really good point, because I think what we see is that a lot of people say to me when they meet me, they go, "Oh, it's as if I'm listening to your podcast," and that's when I'm meeting them live, right? If I'm somewhere, I did an event prior to Christmas, and it was with an organisation to help them. They was called a wellness day, but it was more about them going and having a whole lot of fun for the day as a team. 2 or 3 years in lockdowns and things like that. But now we're going to go and do this and celebrate the year. Yeah. But they got me to come in and talk about the importance of actually taking a break over the Christmas, New Year period. Because over this part of the world, of course, it's summer holidays and things like that. Yeah. But too many of them are still plugged in. And so when I did that was great. But then this guy came up to me and he said to me, "Denis, yeah, I thought it was you." And I'm like, "Huh?" And he introduced himself, and he said to me, "I subscribe to your podcast. I follow you. I'm a fan, but it's just great to meet you in person." I was like, "Wow." He said, "I wasn't sure if it was you, so I had to go back to the podcast just to check the photo again, and that it is you." So I thought it was really quite cool. And the other thing too, Matt, is I get a lot of messages from people around the world. I'm not sure if you do too, whereby they're I'm out going for a walk right now in Spain. I'm listening to this episode, loving it, and this is what I'm getting from it. And that's really great to get those messages, very encouraging as well. And Matt, when people send me messages like that, or they say things to me, and I really enjoy the podcast, I want to ask this other question, which I do, which is, great, what are you enjoying about it? Or what are you getting out of it? Yeah. The reason being is I want to know whether I'm hitting the mark, or what else are they looking for, or what does it mean for them? Because I think for me, that's the biggest thing. Hearing from people who've come back to me saying, "Hey, I heard this episode," and on the freestyle version I've got, it's called Ask Denis, even though it's part of the Leadership is Changing podcast. Sure. You shared this, and this is what I went and did, and this is what it meant for me. Or I heard you ask that one question with that person you interviewed, and that really helped me understand what I needed to do, and this is what I've gone and done with it. I think if you can understand that kind of stuff from people about what they're actually doing with what you're sharing, or the interviews they're having, because everyone has different types of podcast formats, right, and what they do. I think it's really powerful to understand that.
Yeah, it is. But there is this unknown is not the right word. This sort of extra benefit of doing the podcast, and that is actually your podcast, if it's good and your content is good, will genuinely help people. And that's why people get in touch and say thank you. And great content helps people, which is obviously what your podcast is doing.
Yeah, and I think that's whether you write a book, blog, podcasting, whatever it is, and if you're out there that is of quality, that's adding value to others, that's important. I think too many people become self-conscious rather than being audience conscious, and I think if they think about the audience and what they need and help them, that's going to be a lot of value, right? That's going to actually help a lot. So I think that's really important. That's something that's really quite key to think about. And I think that's where a lot of people sort of get tripped up at times as well, and what they're doing is because they're really thinking about them and what they want to say, which is important. Then on the other side, though, is what is the audience actually wanting or needing as well, and how it's going to help them.
If you're intrigued and want to dive deeper into this conversation, check out Podjunction Cohort, where you can listen to the complete interview and much more. Simply visit thepodjunction.com for more information about how to join.
Welcome back. I'll just bring my microphone up so you can hear me. That's professionalism right there. And you just smacked your microphone. Wow. We're a proper professional. And you're now coughing down the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, I can only apologise. Apparently, we know what we're doing. Ironically, I mean, before we start talking about Dennis, you're going to listen to this podcast and go, why did you not cut that bit out? Do you mean that as in, you know, you not being near the microphone, you smacking the microphone and coughing? We could do, right? And I appreciate this is not what, like I say, what Dennis talked about. We will get to Dennis. But I think this is a good learning point. We tend to leave it in. Why do we leave it in?
So that you can get to know us and like us for our crazy, selves. We're not perfect. We're not refined.
No, we're definitely not refined. That's for sure. I think you're right. It's an authenticity thing, isn't it? You actually get to see everything. So we record these podcasts in one take. So when you're watching Dennis talk, we're watching Dennis talk. We're making notes, and we try and record them in one take. One, to keep the amount of editing down. We like to minimize the amount of editing going on, which is not always that straightforward, but, you know, we try and do that. But two, I think it just adds a lot. And, we've never really done the very highly polished podcast where we cut out all the ers and the ums and we do all of that sort of stuff. I say we've never done that. We did, but then we realized actually it's probably better not to do that. So side point there. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why we do that. Oh, yes. So let's talk about Dennis.
Okay.
Is a great guy, Dennis, isn't he? And you can, like I've said, check out his full interview on the Podjunction cohort. Just head to the podjunction.com and listen to his whole episode. Really great interview. What did you get out of that? What's in your notes? I see you've got lots.
Quite a few things, yeah. Okay, where should I start? I think what I really liked about it was that, you know, we talk about the benefits of podcasting. That's what we do. Yeah. Right. And I think what I really liked about his story that he told about people coming up to him and the different business opportunities was that he pointed out, he drew out the really tangible returns of having, being credible and the brand exposure, and all that. I just thought that was a really good point that he made.
Yeah, I wrote down the same thing actually, that he started it to help people to increase his credibility. Obviously, exposure was one thing that he said, and then the know, like, and trust factor of Dennis, wasn't it? This idea, I think it was Zig Ziglar that said it. You know, people buy from people they know, like, and trust, which is one of the great benefits of a podcast. Is that people do get to know you, right? And so just like you've learned today that Salaf likes to hit microphones and is a little bit bossy. So next time, you know, if you ever meet her, just don't have a microphone and just be careful what you say. So, but you learn that because we're on a podcast chatting, right? And it's interesting how intimate that is. Really interesting. And so I love Dennis's story, you know, where he's at the event. It's like, oh, you're the Dennis from the podcast. I've had it happen to me a few times. You're the guy on the podcast thing. I've only ever had it happen to me once where I was walking down the street and someone went, "You're that guy on YouTube." I was like, that was a little bit weird. Not going to lie. But if that was you that did that, thank you. It fed my ego no end. Just like
still reeling from it.
Yeah, I'm famous. Woohoo! Yeah, no, not at all. One person on the whole planet. But it that exposure obviously increases, but it is that know, like, and trust factor, isn't it? Do you get that when you listen to podcasts? Do you feel like you know people?
Yes, I do. Because the reason I hesitated was because it's not like that for all of them. It's the ones that I go back to consistently, and I think that's probably why. Because I feel like I know them and I like them and I trust them.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. The more you're connected in with it, the more you get to know somebody. Like you'll pick up little tidbits just listening to this show about what we like and don't like. You know, like I've got to redo a roof. I mentioned that at this, and it's just little bits like that where you kind of go, okay, that's interesting. At least I do in my head. So yeah, the know, like, and trust factor I thought was very, very good. But I thought one of the things that Dennis talked about was when he talked about, you know, getting messages from people. And this I thought was a really important point. People do reach out. They do get in touch. They do connect with you, don't they, when you do a podcast. And they let you know what they think. They let you know if they're getting any value out of it. They let you know if it's rubbish. But you do get people from around the world, right? And what he said I thought was really interesting when he talked about asking them what they enjoy about the show. Do we do that? You know, when people reach out to us on EP? I don't know if we do.
I don't think, no, we don't. Unless you're in a conversation with them.
Yeah.
But not so much if it's an email or just,
Yeah, I think that's a good learning point from that. I think we should start doing that. I know a lot of people connect with me on LinkedIn and social media, just going, oh, I'm really enjoying the podcast. But actually just going back to them, I just normally go back and say, oh, I really appreciate it, keep listening. But I think actually I liked his point there of asking them what they're, what they're getting out of it, because it's a sense check to see whether you're hitting the mark, what you're doing, what's resonating.
Yeah.
Because you don't always know that information.
But question.
Yeah.
What are some best practices then to be able to understand what your listeners like or don't like, what resonates or doesn't resonate? How do you gather that information? For example, we talked about our EP. We're not going out looking for that information, but what would be some best practices around that, do you think?
That's an entire episode there. We should start asking people that question. I think for me, people do write in, and they, whilst I don't necessarily say to them, what do you get out of it? When they write in, they'll say, I really enjoyed this, or I thought that was a really great point. I'm always intrigued, out of the guests we have on the show, what guests write in to tell me that they've connected with that guest. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if someone's listening to the show, they like the person that's being interviewed and they think, oh, I'm going to reach out to them. Often the listener will message me and say, really enjoyed the show. I'm going to reach out to Dennis or whoever. I just thought it was a really interesting guy. And so that's also an interesting thing, because you find out which guests are engaging. Yeah. You can obviously look at your download stats, which is interesting. I was reading a message from Steve Canal earlier. I think that's his name, Steve Canal, the YouTube guy. And he was talking about how when he launches a YouTube video, he watches the stats for the first few hours, and he tracks how many people are viewing the video versus how many people should be viewing that, what an average is, right? And if it's below, then they'll change something. And he was giving us an example. He said one of the things he changed for this particular video, which talked about affiliate marketing for YouTube, he changed on it the title, because he thought maybe people just aren't into this idea of affiliate marketing because it's performing slightly below par. So he changed the title and then the stats went up. So there's obviously a lot of information you can get from the data, like what words in the titles are resonating the most. So if you look at your most viewed episodes, are there things in those titles which make a bit more sense? You know, you can look at the downloads. And then on platforms like YouTube and stuff, you can see where people drop off and where people are engaged, and it gives you a little graph. So they found that interesting, that they didn't find interesting. So there's all those tidbits really. And I think perhaps the most obvious one is if your listenership is not growing.
Yes.
That's probably a sign that people are just really bored now and they've had enough. So that would be my obvious ones. Does that answer your question?
It does.
It's a good question.
Thank you.
Oh, welcome. So the last thing that I wanted to come back to, this idea of self-consciousness versus audience consciousness, which I thought was a great phrase, Dennis. I really enjoyed that. The reason why I thought it was a great phrase, I was actually talking to a company this morning about whether they should set up a podcast. Okay. And a great bunch of guys, and we were on a Zoom call. There was maybe, I want to say 10 people on the call, something like that, 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there. And we're talking about a podcast and, whether or not they should start a podcast for their business. They've got, there's some questions they need to ask. But one of the things I asked them, I said, show of hands, 12 people on the call, show of hands, who wants to host the podcast? And bless them, there was one lady on the call. I won't mention her name because it's just not fair. But she was sort of sat like this, and I said, hands up, who wants to do a podcast? And I've got my hands raised if you're listening to the audio version, sort of underneath her chin. And I said, who wants to do the podcast? Show her hands. And her hands slapped the table like that.
That's a definite no.
Yes, she said that was her going, I'm out. That's it. I'm out. And I thought it was really funny. And out of that room, only one person went, yeah, I'd host it. And she was really excited about the idea of hosting a podcast. So I said, right, those who didn't put their hand up, in fact, the lady that slammed her hands down, I'm like, why did you do that? What was really fascinating was everybody who said that they couldn't host the podcast. When I asked them why, it came down to not being good enough, not understanding it, fear, not being an expert enough, all of which are very understandable reasons not to start a podcast, I think. But none of them are worthwhile reasons, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about, this idea of being, so they were very self-conscious. It's like, I can't do this. How do I know? I'm not an expert. I don't know the topics well enough. Versus audience conscious. And I'm like, if you're doing an interview style podcast like we do, or this co-host style podcast with an interview in it, because why would we not? Then it's not like we need to know all the answers. We just need to know how to ask good questions, right? And to do that, we need to be audience conscious as opposed to self-conscious. And I thought this was a really great phrase from Dennis. Very apt for a conversation I had earlier on today. So, don't let your self-conscious self stop you from doing the podcast. Don't let that be the reason. If there are good reasons not to do it, then fine. Don't let that be the reason. And be very, very audience conscious. I think that's what makes a good podcast, is like you're always thinking about who's listening to the show and will this help them? Yes or no? And I think as long as you're delivering that, you should be okay. Anything else from you?
I think I would just add to that the quality of the content, or the quality of the conversation, cannot be underestimated. Right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to especially when you're thinking about the audience, as you're saying, it's really important.
Yeah, it is. And actually who you have on as a guest becomes really important, isn't it? And choosing guests that will resonate well with your audience, being very audience conscious when choosing your guests.
Yeah.
I have, if I'm totally honest, there's been a few times when I've chosen guests just because I want to talk to them. Just because I think, you're right.
Sorry, yes, I'm back.
We've chosen guests just because I really want to talk to them. And I think that, and 9 times out of 10, those people have offered really great value to our audience. I don't always do that. It's just every now and again. Most of the time we have guests on the show and we think, right, are they going to add value to our audience? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Are they audience? In fact, I mean, we talked about this on the pre-call. You basically tell people no if you don't think they're very audience conscious and they're very sales conscious.
For sure. Yeah. I like to see that they're able to teach, quote unquote, what they're talking about, rather than just be able to know it.
Yeah. You know what, Sadaf? I often wonder, and I don't know what the answer would be. Like, would I make it onto one of your podcast shows? Do you know what I mean? If you were like, if we weren't working together and you were like, it's like, can I come onto your show? And you'd be like, right, we're going to do a pre-call. I don't know if I'd ever make it through.
Yeah, you would, for sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's it from Dennis. What have we got next time?
Next, we've got Adam Pierce, and he is going to be talking about how to use podcasts strategically.
Struggling with the English language there.
Yes. And establish relationships with businesses. Yes.
Adam's a legend. He is. We do like Adam. And so you'll enjoy this one with Adam. What's the name of his podcast? Is it Across the Pond? Shopify Across the Pond.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know Adam from the e-commerce world, and he's got a great podcast and a great accent too. I really like his little Brummie accent that he's got going on. So yes, do check in for our conversation with Adam. Do make sure you like and subscribe to the show to get a hold of that, because it's going to be a great conversation. Anything else from you in closing?
Nope. I'm good.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode at Podjunction. where business meets podcasting. If you enjoyed the insights from today and wish to hear the full conversation with today's special guest, don't forget to visit thepodjunction.com, where you'll find more information about how you can join today. Whether you listened while on the go or in a quiet moment, thank you for letting us be a part of your day. Remember, every episode is a chance to gain insights and to transform your business with podcasting. So keep tuning in, keep learning, and until next time, happy podcasting.